In this video, we'll be going over IRS Form 1095-C, Employer Provided Health Insurance Offer and Coverage. So this is the tax form that a lot of people may receive if they work for an applicable large employer and that employer offered health care under the Affordable Care Act. So for most taxpayers, this is an informational form. It should really not impact your tax situation too terribly, but you would be wise to keep this in your tax records for reference in case something comes up down the line. So we'll go over this so that you can get a better understanding, and then we'll talk about some things that you may want to consider with this tax form. So there are three parts to it. Part one is the employee and the large employer information. Part two is the offer of coverage. And then part three is the covered individuals under this plan. So in part one, you have the employee's information. This should be for the employee, regardless of how many covered individuals that employee has in their family or household unit. The employee would be the recipient of this form. So in this case, that would be John Doe. We've got his name in line 1, followed by his social security number, and then his street address, city, state, and zip code. On the right-hand side, we have the name of his employer, which is Acme Employers, their employer identification number, followed by their address, street address, city, state, and zip code. The primary thing here to pay attention to is this contact telephone number. According to the IRS form instructions, this should be a good contact phone number for an individual to reach within the company if they're having problems with their 1095-C. If they haven't received it, it's due to employees by January 31st of the year following the year of coverage. So for the 2024 tax year, this would be due to individual taxpayers no later than January 31st, 2025. So in part two, there's the employee offer of coverage. The employer is required to put the employee's age as of January 1st in here, followed by the 2-digit number that corresponds to when they started within their plan. So according to this, let's imagine that John Doe was working as an employee, but he wasn't eligible for health care benefits until April. So his health care plan started in April, so 04, and then this code right here on line 14, that corresponds with the code of no offer of coverage. So this means that John Doe is not offered coverage, or he was offered coverage that doesn't qualify as minimum essential coverage. So under all of these categories, there's minimum essential coverage, which provides a minimum value to an employee, but the self-only coverage premium, so the premium for just the employee, is equal to or less than 9.5% of the figure that's calculated by the federal government, representing the 48 continuous states single federal poverty line amount. So what that means is that's the baseline of what minimum essential coverage is. Let's imagine that the single federal poverty line number is $1,000 per month. In that case, the minimum essential coverage requirement would mean that coverage should be available to a single person for $95 per month or less. That's only for the single coverage. Now, this code 1A also means that minimum essential coverage was offered to your spouse and dependents, and this means that it's a qualifying offer. So a qualifying offer basically just means that, like, your particular situation you're cared for. All of these other codes are kind of variations of that, where maybe the employer provided minimum coverage to you but not to your spouse, or maybe to you and your spouse but not your dependents. Line 1H or code 1H means that there's no offer of coverage. And then starting with code 1L, all of these are references to what's known as an individual coverage health reimbursement arrangement, or an HRA. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But basically, what that means is there's an arrangement between you and your employer where they peg your what you should be able to pay for health care based on your zip code, and then they give you they provide coverage, or a health insurance coverage under an HRA. So put money into your account, you pay your bills, and then they reimburse you. So in this situation, line 14 kind of looks like this. Had John been eligible for that coverage the entire year, then we would only be looking at the column right here for all 12 months. So any value where it's same for all 12 months, it'll just be summarized right here on this, in this column on the left. So the employee required contribution, for example, would look something like this. Oh. The section 4980H, safe harbor, really applies to that's basically for the IRS's purpose, to make sure that they understand whether or not the employer is following tax rules and qualifies for certain tax privileges to employers. So the only thing that you should know about is that if it says line or code 2C, then that means that was coverage that was available to you. So basically right here. None of this effect, other than the code 2C, none of the other information in that would impact a taxpayer's eligibility for the premium tax credit, which would be calculated on IRS form 8962. So we covered, so the last thing that we need to cover is the zip code. Generally speaking, for minimum essential coverage, that would be based on your location. If it's for an HRA, I believe it can be based on either the employee's location. So if certain codes were used, one of these codes, 1L, 1M, 1N, or 1T, if that was on line 14, that would be based on your primary residence. If it's 1O, 1P, 1Q, or 1U, which all have to do with NHRA, then it would be your primary employment site. So those could be two separate zip codes, and that's relevant because your zip code can be the determining factor of what's allowable as, as your employee's share of the healthcare responsibility. In part 3, we would list all the covered individuals. So let's just say that John is married to Mary Jane Doe, and her social is backwards from John's, and then her date of birth, if her social security number is not available, would be entered here. So you should only see one or the other. So let's just say that that's John's daughter, Elizabeth Doe. And let's just say that they fell under the same coverage situation where they were covered from April all the way through. So if the employer provided self-insured coverage, you would see that this box is checked. So, and then there's plenty of space for all of the covered individuals. The IRS recommendation for each individual taxpayer is twofold. One, you don't necessarily need to put any of this information in your tax return, but you should keep it in your tax records. And then two, if you have family members that are not dependents for your tax return, but they are listed here as a covered individual, then you should provide a copy of this form to your covered individuals. Your employer will not do that. They will only provide a copy of your Form 1095-C to the employee. So just keep that in mind. And again, there's not a whole lot of reporting requirements from from individual taxpayers to the IRS, but it is a good idea to just have a basic understanding of what your coverage is, and then knowing who you can talk to if you have any questions or concerns. So I don't think there's a whole lot of additional information. If you've participated in the health insurance marketplace or Obamacare or a state marketplace, you might receive a different version of Form 1095. So there's 1095A, there's 1095B, and then this is 1095C. So depending on how you obtain your health care, you may receive more than one copy of Form 1095, and that's acceptable. That's fine. But if you were looking for to claim the premium tax credit, then you would need to pay particular attention to the health care that you obtained from the exchange versus the health care that was available through your employer. So you would need to complete IRS Form 8962 to make sure that you kind of cover down on that. And if you were paid in advance on the premium tax credit, you may end up needing to pay the difference if it turns out your income was too high, or something else caused you to fall afoul of that provision. So we'll put links in the show notes to some of the other resources we created about the other 1095 versions, some of the other healthcare related tax forms that I've seen, as well as the premium tax credit form. So, and you can see if you need more information about any of these tax forms, you can always go to our website, teachmepersonalfinance.com, type in the IRS form and the tax form number. So IRS form 1095, you would type that into the search bar, and it would show you all the different articles we've done on the various 1095 series forms. So you can find articles on tax forms on our website through the search bar. You can also hit the link in the show notes. So if you like our articles, please consider subscribing to our newsletter. And if you like our YouTube videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you have any questions or comments, or if there's another topic that you'd like to see in an upcoming video, please hit me up in the comments section. Thank you very much and have a great day.